So this is the first of the series of videos describing images and image adjustment. When I say images, I'm referring to the taskbar at the top of the Photoshop screen, where if I click on image, it produces something called adjustment. And from adjustment, there's a second drop-down menu, which is hue and saturation. And hue and saturation produces this series of slides where you have hue, saturation, and lightness. The abilities to control all of those. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this series of video tutorials. Now, first of all, what I'm going to do is copy this image. The idea being to show just how much can be produced from a single starting point and how simple that starting point can be. And I think that's probably fundamental to the whole use of Photoshop and its relevance to producing planting images in garden design. Here's an image of, well, it's a green JPEG, and we know in layers that it's called green here. There's the JPEG, and it's moving around. We know from previous videos that this can be manipulated. It can be made bigger and smaller. In fact, on these toggles, if we just look at that toggle there, it can be stretched, it can be stretched, it can be stretched in all these directions. It can be made smaller like that. It can be made smaller like that. So let's just, and then you have to apply. I'm going to click apply. That takes the toggles off it and freezes that shape. Now, we're now going to copy that image. The way I copy is if you press on a PC the Alt key and then left click, it produces an identical copy. I press Alt, which you can't see me doing, so I'm Alt and then click, and it produces an identical copy. Now, we've now got 3 of these, and you can see that these are all piled up in the layers column. We've got green, green copy, and green copy 2. We're going to call them different things as we go. If we take the first green here, right click and click that green, you notice it's selected there in the right hand. If I go to image, adjustment, hue and saturation, there's our sliding scale. I'll just move it out of the way so you can see that. We're looking at this one here. If we change the hue, if we move this hue slide, notice how the color changes. You notice it doesn't necessarily change exactly according to the color swatch along this slide. It depends at your starting point. Your starting point dictates that. So basically you just have to play around with it until you get a different color. Here we have a sort of, let's say it's a reddish color there, slightly terracotta. And if it's saturation, we increase the saturation. It goes to a more intense red. If we slide up the lightness scale, it can go much lighter like that, of course, and much darker towards black, but it's not completely black there, it's sort of dark brown. So you can play around with these scales until you've got something which is very different from the original starting point. Once you've done that, you press OK, and that is now a different color. And so we're going to call it a different color, and we're going to call it red. So, of course, I'm just working with, we had a green starting point. We've now got 2 different colors. I'm going to do exactly the same with this. I'm going to select that. It's called green copy. You can see it's selected there as green copy. We go to image, we go to adjustment, we go to hue and saturation. There we can play around with it. Let's have it as this nice purple color. We'll OK that just as it is, just to save time, and we'll call that purple. All right. And we can then go to the 3rd color here, which in fact, rather than change the color of that, we'll go to that hidden mask tool. We'll go to that hidden mask tool here. There's the elliptical tool. We'll draw an ellipse and select inverse and select that. So we've got completely different arrangement of shapes and patterns from what we started with. We'll now start a second video of the same and carry on from this point.